Thanks a lot, Mike. So, before I introduce our panelists, I just wanted to kind of talk about what culture is from our standpoint. I think we all acknowledge that culture is a really important thing, but it's really hard to kind of boil it down to one thing. And I think it's important to it's really the thing that outlasts for every company. It's what allows companies to innovate and continue to be innovative. And it's the foundation upon which companies are built. And today, I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion on the different approaches that all these companies have taken to building a really unique culture that stands out and that they understand and that all the people that they bring in really understand. So the first person I'll introduce is to my left is Sonia. Sonia is a head troublemaker at a Thinking Ape, which I think in and of itself is a really interesting approach to kind of a title. And a Thinking Ape is a Vancouver-based studio. They're about 50 people, 60 people actually. And she was one of the early employees brought in to focus on people, culture, and outreach because the founders identified that as a very important focal point that they wanted to identify early on. Next, beside her is Emily GREER, co-founder and COO of Congregate, which we all know is a really thriving web-based, community-based browser game platform. And you guys are moving into mobile now, obviously, and you guys got acquired in 2010 by GameStop, but I think what I've known Congregate to be, and I've had a lot of conversations with you guys, is you've built a really strong community that just love their games and are really well engaged, and that's made it a great platform for developers as well. Next to her is Tim. So I just recently started to get to know Tim. And it turns out we started in and around the same time when the Facebook platform launched. Tim's built a company called Kano Apps out of Victoria, BC. And it was a really exciting time in 2008 when Facebook launched their platform. Tim's had a lot of success building community-based RPGs. They have a slew of those, and they've grown their company and evolved it. For us, for UCAN, it really started with a game called Mob Wars that kind of inspired a lot of the other games to come after that. I know it inspired Mafia Wars as well, and that came out of Tim's company. And then next to Tim is Josh. So Josh Nelson is a co-founder at Eastside Games. Which they've described themselves as a fiercely independent studio in Vancouver. I think they're best known for another Facebook game that was really popular in Pop Farm, and they've really taken their brand and played on this indie and independent studio vibe where they've been very outspoken about their culture and whatnot. So that's our panelists for today. And then just myself, I started a company called UCAN Games in Toronto. We're about 55 people now as well, and we got our start on Facebook, and then we focused on mobile, and so now we've launched about 9 titles on mobile and Facebook as well. So that just that's a bit of an introduction for us. So I just wanted to kick it off. Culture is a very broad topic. It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. How do you guys think about culture within your own companies? How do you define it? And how do you show that to your employees? How do you when they walk into the building? What represents your culture there? How can someone tell? Any takers?
I'll go. So at Eastside Games, we just kind of what the introduction said, we fiercely independent. So that's kind of what we went with. So we kind of represent that by, we actually have 3 pillars in our studio that you come in and we put our pillars right up on the wall. So that's really important to us. So their community is everything, fiercely independent, and basically fail faster version of that. I think that's really important to have your culture, your credo, whatever you go by, to just have it visible so people that are visiting your office, that can see your office, can kind of see that, and people in your culture can agree with that, because culture is only going to be built by everyone together. It can't just be some founder saying, this is what we believe in. It has to be everyone saying, yes, I want to do that. Yes, I want to wear your crest around and believe in it, and that sort of thing.
I can add to that a little bit. When we started Kano Apps in 2008, it was myself and 2 other co-founders working out of a condo. So we started Kano Apps because we were unhappy with the places that we worked in, because we felt like the cultures were bad, the leadership wasn't really leading by example. So that's something that we tried to instill very early. We're also a big proponent of core values and trying to drive transparency to everybody in the company, so everybody has an understanding of where we want to go and what direction we want to take the company, and they know exactly in every seat that they're sitting in how they can affect that growth. And I think one of the things that's been beneficial is just trying to maintain that as we start to scale up. So now we're 22.
So we didn't really think about culture at all when we started the company. It was started by me and my brother, and I think as siblings starting a company, our culture was really very much founded and reflected sort of our family relationship, and the company kind of grew into sort of an extended family, just because that's where it started with. We also started with several employees who had worked with us at previous companies, so you were coming in with people who had long histories of sort of trust and expectation, and then as we added new people, that really rolled from there. We don't have we do have a mission statement in terms of, we want to be the best place for developers to have their games and for players to play them, and have that sort of, deep sort of ethos that we should be building something that is more, about a special place, a community, a fairness between developers and their publisher relationship, and between players. And while we never thought about culture, I think we did really build one. We started 7 years ago, and 6 of our first 10 employees are still with the company. 3 years after our acquisition by a 55,000 company, 75% of our of the employees at the time of the acquisition are still with us. So we're 50 people now, and we've really sort of continued to grow. I wouldn't say that our culture has been directed by us. I think mostly it's sort of been spontaneous development of the employees in a relationship, in a situation where they felt comfort and trust. One of the visible things that if you walk into our office is like every desk has like a series of really random signs about somebody's the top Doug or the Doug washer, or they gave me this one to bring to the panel. It's pictures of Saltine, and it says challenge. They call it that because it's not easy, because somebody just completed the Saltine challenge. And like that's kind of, it's really random, and they wanted me to bring it, so I did. That's awesome.
Culture at a Thinking Ape was something that was really important to our founders from the get-go. So I was hired very earlier on, and we acknowledged that we had 2 product lines that we wanted to focus on. One of them was obviously our casual games, as well as our culture. And once we prioritized our culture as something as important as our products, it's something that we iterate on as we continue to grow and scale our company. So we've grown from 10 to 60 in the last 2 years now, I believe. And we've seen, obviously, things that worked at 10 don't necessarily scale at 20, don't necessarily scale at 30, but because we've prioritized it as something that we want to focus time and energy on, we constantly are revising anything that we have in place at the moment.
Thank you. Very cool. So just jumping into it, I've had some conversations with each of the panelists, and I think one of the really interesting things that you talked about, Sonia, was that ATA, you have core hours between 1 to 4. So every day, people, those are the core hours, and then everything else is up to the individual teams. Could you describe how that's like, and why you guys decided to go with those core hours as opposed to the traditional, let's say 9 to 5 or something else?
Sure. So for us, we are very decentralized as a company. We're decentralized by products. We do have shared resources internally, but as Chris mentioned, our core hours are 1 to 4. And we, obviously, each team is responsible to figure out what hours work the best for their team. We don't necessarily encourage people to work 15, 20-hour days, but people kind of design their day the way that they would like it to be designed. One of the main reasons why is because I'm not going to tell a creative person when they're the most creative, or I'm not going to tell someone to be productive at 9 a.m. when they're the most productive at 11 p.m. So this works for us. Obviously, there are challenges with decentralized teams, one of them being communication amongst other teams. So for that, we've put in place town halls and other events internally that bring the entire company together, such as Ask a Founder Fridays. We get 3 founders, so we get all 3 of them on a panel, and we open it up to everybody in the entire company to come and participate and ask the founders whatever they'd like. Could range from what is it like to be married to like the stupidest questions, is being a entrepreneur help you get laid? Just like random things, but it's a good way to get everybody to kind of just come together and hang out with people that they may not hang out with on the daily.
So I know, Emily, that you've had some kind of thoughts around communication being a really important cornerstone, and there's a lot of value to having people in the same room. How would you kind of?
So I mean, we certainly we're flexible in terms of our hours more so than a regular a non-game industry company. But we do have we are a little bit stricter about that. We have our product stand up at 10, and we expect everybody to be in by 10. It's a range before and after that, and a range at the end of the day. But one of the things we've sort of focused on more in recent years is actually sort of being more office first. We are pretty decentralized. We have 2 offices. We have a lot of remote employees, but we really see the value of having people be in the same room at the same time. If you're not there at the same time, it's much harder to communicate. It's much harder to have the quick conversation that resolves something. You don't end up with the bonding experiences and the conversations that you otherwise have. So we've actually gotten a little bit stricter, and sort of reduced the sort of work from home, which had gotten a little bit out of hand, and sort of emphasize that work from home is kind of should be an unusual thing, not a standard. If you can be in the office, you should be, because otherwise, you're losing something in terms of communication. Certainly, we all have, we're flexible about, different needs, and if you have something to do outside of the office, absolutely we're flexible about it, but we really try to have everybody be in the same place as much as possible.
Okay. Josh or Tim?
Sure, I'll go. So I think the main thing with this entire panel is there's no silver bullet for culture. So I've been to all these offices. Well, I haven't been to yours, but I stalk you on Facebook. And I was just really impressed with all the different cultures and how they work. And it's compared to other lectures you go to, you can't really take notes and take it home and be like, I'm going to do my culture exactly like them. Everyone's going to grow their own culture in a different way, and that's great. So what we do is going to be different than what Blue Bat does, different than what Backflip does. It's all going to be different, and everyone's going to have the different ways that work. So we kind of do the core hours thing. We do have some remote employees, but we find collaboration in-house is best for us. But for other studios, that doesn't work. And I know some studios that are really successful that are all remote, and it works great. So I think it's great that everyone has different styles and it works for them. But we're all a bunch of old dudes. Most of us are old dudes with young kids. And we want to make sure that we can work an intense work day and then go home and try to do this dad thing.
Yeah, I'll just say something about communication. I think communication is really the key. So we we don't require people to be in the office at certain times, but I mean, we've ended up with a core office hours just because of communication. It's much easier to look over to see someone that's sitting next to you and ask him a question instead of trying to send 3 or 4 emails back and forth. What we try to do is if people have to work off-site or they want to work, they want to take a day off during the week and then maybe work on the weekend, is just making sure that they communicate that to everybody so everyone has a chance to adjust their schedule around that.
Very cool. And I think you closed that off really nicely. I think really it comes down to making sure that communication is solid and that the different people that you're working with, you can stay in the loop with them and they know exactly what's going on. And if you can get into a groove with the team, then that's really important. What are your thoughts on then managing? How do you guys manage remote teams? Like Emily, for instance, I understand you guys have 2 offices, and everybody else, I think, on the panel has 1 central office. How do you guys manage 2 offices?
It's hard. Actually, I think, so we have about 30 people in San Francisco, which is most of the product design, games team, marketing, etc. Almost all of I think we only have 1 engineer who's actually in San Francisco just because it's such a brutal place to hire and retain engineers. We've got 7 engineers in Portland and then 3 remote throughout the country. And then almost all of our community team was hired from our player base, and they all work from home remotely. I actually think it's easier to have a really distributed workplace where there's a lot of people who are totally remote than it is to have just 2 offices. Because if it were just 2 offices, I think the offices would just start to communicate internally to each other and sort of skip each other. But because we have 3 engineers who aren't with the Portland engineers, we do a lot of communication through group chat, and because they need each other, then that loops the San Francisco office in. But I'm not going to lie and say it's easy. It's really challenging. If the Bay Area were a better hiring place, I would definitely prefer to have have everybody here. That being said, awesome people are the most important thing that you can do, and we've been able to hire really great people that we haven't been able to move to San Francisco, and the group chat is really important to it, and having that be a mix of work chatter and fun things is important. The other thing is just getting people face to face on a regular basis. We have something that's evolved over time we call Work from San Francisco Week. It used to be an offsite and we'd have big meetings, but as we grew and got to 50 people, that started to be a little too cumbersome. So now we just bring everybody in and have them in the same office, and we have a little extra meetings, but it's mostly just about being and working in the same place together, and then going out and having fun every night. And this is really crucial to making sure that the community person in New Hampshire is not terrified of the slightly silent programmer in Portland if they've hung out together in person.
Do you feel so you're in the San Francisco office?
Yeah.
Do you feel less connected to any of the other folks out there? And have there been instances where you were, and how did you address that?
Working remotely, I think especially the people working from their own homes, I don't feel as connected. Some of them are very, very chatty and talk to me a lot on IM, and I feel very connected to them. And that's the type of person who can be effective working remotely. We've had some people who were, quieter, more disengaged, where it didn't work. We've also seen a couple of times where without sort of the boundaries of an office, people burned out because they were working all the time and didn't have that sort of natural shut-off mechanism of I'm leaving the office and shutting things down, and we had people burn out that way. We've also had people who just sort of silently slipped into not working very much at all, and sort of both of those cases have to be handled, and you sort of have to be sort of checking in in terms with regular communication, and also looking at their work product to get a sense of where they are. But if you're going to have somebody work remotely, you really need them to be absolutely self-driven self-starters with good communication skills, but also the self-discipline or the life situation that sort of naturally cuts them off before they work too much.
And I know the rest of you guys might, you've had experiences with sort of more one-off situations where you have people remote. Was that challenging? Did you guys deliberately make the decision to keep one office, and how was that thought through, as opposed to maybe setting up a separate office? I know, like Sonia, for instance, ATA had a Seattle office for some time, but then you've brought the Seattle office back to Vancouver, or?
We still have a Seattle office,
Okay.
but I mean, in terms of development or growth of that office, it's kind of up in the air at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all
okay.
I can really say about that.
Okay. And then Tim, Josh?
Yeah, so we've been a Facebook, or primarily a Facebook developer for quite a long time. We built up a strong community, and some of those community members became either moderators or helped with our support. Those guys were remote. We did find challenges with that just because it was difficult to integrate them with our culture. So we try to do things like having video conferences, trying to include people in events that we are having or meetings. But since we've brought all those pieces in-house, we've just found the communication, the ability for people on the support side to work directly with the developers next to them on solutions for our players has really been helpful. And for us, as an indie developer, we try to separate ourselves from the bigger companies by humanizing ourselves and showing that we are an indie developer. We're not a company of 200 people. There's a few guys working together and trying to solve problems, trying to create the best games. So to our user base, don't treat us like we're a big company. We may be slower to release changes, but we're going to put a lot of care in what we do. So.
I'd work for you, so if this doesn't work out, let me know. I don't really have many skills, but, I'm a fan.
Come over.
I think what Emily said was a really good point, that work from San Francisco week. So what we can do as why culture is so important, especially to smaller independent studios, is we can't compete with the bigger studios in terms of what we can offer you in terms of your package for just like how much we're going to pay you on benefits and that sort of thing. So we have to entice people in other ways, and culture is a big driver in that. I mean, you can work for make a lot more money, or you could work for a company that is the largest virtual marijuana distributor in the world. So that does attract some people that it's like, you guys can do anything you want in your games. I want to work there. So we really want to make sure that we do a similar thing, that we have one fellow that works out of Saskatoon, which is, if you haven't been there, you should definitely vacation there. It's beautiful. But he can't leave, and he's an awesome artist. But what we do is we fly everyone in, at least for our team. We have our quarterly parties in the pub, and with the sort of State of the Union, we make sure we fly everyone in so they can experience that. And there's only so much that you can do through Skype, and that's all good to communicate. But I think we want to bring these people into the culture, into the office. We do a lot of our own sort of rewards. You earn your hoodie after you've been there a certain amount of time, and that sort of stuff. And that sort of stuff has to be done in person. If it's mailed and he opens it, it doesn't feel as much as him coming in and being like, wow, there's all these new people, or you're the guy that made this. That's awesome. So I think that's really important, that if you do remote teams, even if it's low key, plan to do a lunch, plan to do something, meet in person at least once per quarter.
Yeah, so I think one of the elements there is that if you know somebody in person, then you start to understand their tone, their written tone. So it's easier to tell if they're joking or sarcastic or what's going on. Because if you don't, you have to take everything at face value. But once you know them, then you can understand better. So it's that meeting regularly in person really helps with the continual written communication.
Okay. And you guys talked on, you touched on slightly tangential point of introducing people to your cultures. And I think there's some really interesting stories of recruiting. So Tim, you said you've brought in community members and you've hired them. And Emily, I remember last night we were talking about how 7 of your team members. I believe that was the number.
I did a count. It's 9. So
9.
Almost 20% of our company
Okay. Wow.
was hired out of our player base.
Right. So and so what? Why'd you do that, and why is that important to you? I think that's an interesting point. Yeah.
So almost everybody from our player base has started off in the community team, working with the moderators. Nearly all of them were moderators to begin with, and in that role where you're working with players and you're actually the boss of the moderators, it's really important that you understand understand what's driving things, what's the interreaction between things, and we just kept finding really, really awesome people. Community management is a pretty tiring thing, though, and so we've always looked for paths paths for somebody to move on and move upwards in the company. So currently, we've got 2 producers, a product manager, a marketing manager, and an accounting guy who are all former community people, and they're amongst our very best employees. Actually, one of them is right there, and it's just a great way to hire awesome people, and the quality of the people is the most important, and it's actually relatively easy to integrate them with the culture because they essentially were already part of, our company culture is in many ways the extension of the site culture, and if they're already a very important part of the site culture, then it's very natural and easy to bring them into the company culture.
Okay. And do you try to bring them locally, or do you have any? Yeah.
We move them if we can, and there are limitations. A lot of times they have partners who are in school or custody situations with children that make it impossible. But the goal with everybody is, if not this year, then 2 or 3 years down the road, we want them to we want them to move to San Francisco.
Okay. Okay. Tim, was there anything you wanted to weigh in there?
No, I think that covers a similar situation to us. We currently don't have any employees that are from the community at the moment, but we do work closely with volunteers on our moderators.
Do you think you would ever consider doing that, or?
Yeah, I think we would consider it. I think we'd probably look to bring them in-house just because it helps with the communication, for sure.
Right on. I know something that a lot of you guys think about is promoting transparency, and it seems like everybody is pretty transparent with data. Does anyone want to talk about what they're willing to share? Is it like all financial data or some financial data? And then do you want to talk a bit about how you go about sharing that data? Is it a weekly email that you're reporting on metrics to the teams, or is it more of a passive thing? Anybody want to start and take that topic?
So this is really important for us, and this is something, I come from the AAA game space, and there's no sharing of data. And then what happens in that is people get randomly called into boardrooms, and their desk gets packed up, and then it's gone. And so you didn't really even have a chance to kind of fight for it. And that was always a little bit of fear in those cultures, even though they're great studios, that we really want to change. So we put absolutely every piece of data up on screens all around. We built our own in-house analytics tools, and people have access to all of that. It's on mobile, it's up. You know what project you're working on, you know your metrics, you know what the pass and fail is, and people kind of have a chance to fight for those products and to improve them and that sort of thing. So we put all of that up. We also have deeper dives with our analytics team to say, this is what you guys have to do by this point in order for us to continue building the game.
So you use it to drive goals and whatnot throughout the company, and that's a way to track that. What about just like do you show profit and loss for each game?
Everything.
Everything.
Everything. Everyone either has access to it, or if they don't feel comfortable doing deep dives, they can talk to somebody from the analytics team and ask for those deep dives. But what we actually found with that is we thought it would be super awesome and to deep dive and do that, like a guy like Tabor's totally gonna love to do that, and he'll look at data all day and love it. But it was actually a big culture friction in the culture when you try to get a really talented artist to be really interested in why this is selling more than this, or this is doing that, or a designer, or even an engineer. Sometimes they're like, I just like, what, do I have to learn this? I thought we had business people to do this. So that's been a real kind of friction point in our culture that we have to now, when we hire people, we hire people that want to learn about this. So we actually found we're now hiring a lot more indie developers that come to work for us for a period of time and learn how to do all these business things themselves, prepare themselves, dust themselves back off, and then go off and hopefully make a hit game and knock it out of the park. We didn't expect that. That was just one of the friction points in the culture that I was like, wow, I thought everyone really wanted to talk about rolling versus absolute retention. Like, this is totally interesting, but not the case.
So I have a couple follow-up questions, but I definitely want to hear what the rest of you guys think. So Tim.
Yeah, so we're also pretty transparent. We do a pretty good rhythm of meetings, so quarterly meetings, monthly meetings, weekly meetings. Usually in our quarterly meetings and monthly meetings, we go over financials. We look at P&L, and we look at different cost centers across the company. We think that that's really important because we think of ourselves as a startup, and we're targeting growth, and we want people to know what they can do in their seats to help us grow and be successful. One thing that we learned over time and through surveys of those types of meetings is how to package and present the information. A lot of the times, if you have different people in different seats, for example, artists, we found that by putting up really complicated financials, people didn't get it. They didn't understand what was going on. So trying to find the balance to provide enough information, but also pull it back so it makes sense for everyone is important.
Okay.
So we do weekly reporting for everybody on revenue and key metrics, and our sort of tracking things versus budget. Since now we're part of a large corporate company, they care quite a bit about where we are relative to budget. But in terms of financial metrics, we're not hidden about that, and it's something that I do speak to on a regular basis. We have every 2 weeks we have a 15-minute all company call, and we'll sort of briefly speak to financials, but basically it's more of just a financials good, financials bad. I don't think most employees are deeply interested in, like, where they are. They want to know, is their job generally secure? Do we need to be worrying about
Right.
costs? And so I think I try to think about the details of the financials more in terms of, general guidance on
Right,
where
right.
we are, and but don't try and bore people with
And how it impacts the teams,
Right,
really.
like,
It's like
and
how it
what's the
impacts
difference-
my job.
right. What's the difference between EBITDA and net income? Because that's boring.
Sonia, did you want to take a quick crack? And then I had a couple follow-up questions that were...
Ours is similar to Eastside Games, and we have a panel that everyone has access to. We don't actually send out emails with financials. We just have a very open, collaborative space. So we encourage people, if they have those questions, to go and talk to anyone on either the analytics team or a founder and just say, hey, what's going on with X game or B game? But if I wanted to, I could go into a panel and have access to all that information.
How do you guys deal with the let's say a game's just not doing really well at all? Like, let's say you put a lot of effort behind a game launch and it just completely fails and it doesn't hit your projections or it doesn't do well. All that data is now public. How is it received? How's it dealt with? Josh, did you...
We've only ever had hit games, so that's never been a problem. Yeah, that's a great question, and that's the downside of the open communication. And we had a good talk at Phil's Coffee this morning about this. That's the other side of culture is not always just all good things. You have to have some friction in the culture as well. So, I mean, that's something that we found where we just have to educate people on and communicate. So the tough issues in culture are way more important than the easy things of culture to do. So, a game failing, we've had a lot of those. I think key communication, coming up with a strategy, getting people to brainstorm and figure out, okay, here's the timeline. How can we fix this? In the past, we've just kind of been quiet about it, and the founders go and talk about that, or go talk with the leads of the team or something like that. And that was definitely the wrong way to do it. So what we really need.
All the people that work in the church and the movie, they actually do work.
So the main thing is just communicate and come up with a plan, and then after that, get everyone involved in to say, like, okay, we have 3 weeks or 4 weeks or a month to figure this out, and just keep the communication going, because the worst thing, and we've done it before in the past, is just go silent about it, and then that's where people get into that space about what's going to happen.
I think when things go bad is when culture is most important. If you've built up a good culture during the good times, you can get people will stay at a company that's on some sort of like positive rocket ride, whatever the culture almost. But once things go bad, that's when they start leaving in droves. I think. Unfortunately, Zynga is kind of a pretty good example of that.
Yeah, totally.
A strong culture is what keeps people motivated and involved when when things are tighter, when things
Those are the
uncertain.
true tests, right?
Yeah, those are the true tests.
Yeah.
And that's when you find out a lot about your culture. And I think that being said, I think it's really hard. When you want things to go well, to be honest with yourselves, and sort of to bring forward the failures, or admitting that a certain thing hasn't worked as well. I'd say we still struggle with that kind of sort of honesty. I think a lot of things that are we talk about them when they launch, and then they don't do so well, and so we just don't talk about them anymore and kind of move on. But some things where we've done larger investments, we've just had to sort of frankly own that this isn't going how we hoped, and we're reallocating these resources back into the company to work on this, and often on a few occasions people have been let go, and I think people have seen it coming, and it hasn't been ultimately it hasn't really rocked our culture, but it's something we struggle. It's always a struggle.
Right. And I think a good segment to that topic is crunch. This industry has gotten a really bad rap for a lot of overtime and overworking employees. And I know each of you guys deal with it slightly differently. What do you guys think about crunch? And do you guys have a lot of it? And where is it enforced somehow, or is it because the product isn't doing as well as you'd expect it to? So the expectation is that people are staying over and working a lot harder. Yeah. Does anyone want to start on that?
We generally have crunch pre-launch and post-launch, but a lot of it's heavily communicated to the team prior, so it's not a surprise. Everyone knows if we do plan on going into crunch mode, how long that crunch is going to last for, and what those hours look like during the day. A lot of the times it's not, the ridiculous hours of 19, 20-hour days, but it generally is an extended period in day where it could be.
What is it?
It can range. So let's say as I mentioned earlier, core hours 1 to 4, and let's say someone on that team generally comes in at 1, but someone else on that team comes in at 9. The team will decide what those hours look like for them, and we don't count the number of hours people sit in their seats. It's more about everyone working together as a team to get the stuff that they need to get done. So we I know we talked a lot about crunch yesterday, but it seems to work for our team actually. We've seen that it brings people together. Yes, we do provide the perks that most people do, where we have dinner or lunch, but people actually end up bonding and end up discovering things that they might have been challenged with and come out like really good friends afterwards. So yes, it's exhausting and daunting, but at the end of the day, they, like you said, those are kind of the periods in which you can see your company kind of steer the ship towards the same direction.
And is it effective at you do it because you have this deadline for some reason for getting a product out or getting a game out or whatnot. Does it actually end up working for anybody?
It's worked for us to date, but we don't do it like super often. We do it whenever we need to do it, but it's not every month or every 3 or 4 months. It's dependent on a product launch and to get everyone kind of revved up and get something out the door.
Right.
So we really don't believe in crunch and have actively avoided it. I think some of that comes from my brother's a longtime game programmer, and in his early 20s worked at Origin on the Ultima games and worked 20-hour days for months at a time, and really burned out and knew how that affected him. And so when we were starting the company, we were also starting it older in our 30s, and the kind of hours that you work, that's easier when you're younger than it is when you're older. So we've always looked at it as this is a marathon and not a sprint. Have there been periods in which we've worked crazy hours? Yes, and particularly in 2007 when we were growing really fast and we were having scaling issues, then people would put in intense hours to sort of fix things. But we've always really, really avoided sort of the creation of any kind of artificial deadline to get something done, because ultimately we're a web platform. If it goes out, 2 days later, a week later, that's nearly always okay. But we're a web platform, so that's a little easier than games.
Right. Yeah, if you guys want to share any thoughts, go ahead.
So, we have pretty good work-life balance. A lot of the guys have families, so we try not to have too much crunch. Some situations where that comes up is, for example, have you guys heard of MySpace? MySpace, they were a big game developer, or they were a big platform for games early on, around 2008, 2009, slowly have gone away. We've had games that were there, and about a month ago, MySpace shut games down. So we weren't actively putting a lot of effort in, but it was generating revenue for the company. They didn't give us any notice. We found out through, I think, a forum. Players actually sent messages in saying, hey, I think MySpace is shutting down as a platform. So in that case, we had to move quickly to find a destination for those players to play. And we were able to turn around and push them to a different site. Some players over to Congregate within 2 days, I think. So that was a crunch out of necessity, but it just showed, for us, it really showed how strong of a team we had, that they were able to shift over and do something really quickly and minimize the impact.
And it seems like a good example of they cared about the result. It's like that's what actually happened. So these are the circumstances that we collectively are facing. So let's do something about it, kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's like promoting that urgency, but not a high stress environment.
Right. Is there? I'll take some questions. This went by really fast. Is there anybody that has any questions for the panel?
Thanks, guys, for your time, and appreciate the candor and the honesty. It's good times. I had 2 questions, but I'll save one for later. But I had one about the remote tools aspect. You guys have remote teams in some aspects. You have people you're working with. From the start of your company to where you guys are now, was it an exploration of the tools and how you were going to communicate, or was it something set from the onset and it's been working with you? Did it evolve? Has it remained intuitive? How do you guys go about the remote process and maintaining communication with a tool set?
It's definitely evolved. We started off with Basecamp and Campfire, 37 Signals products. We're still using Campfire chat, though if we started now, we might use something different. We're not using Basecamp for collaboration anymore, and we sort of are continually replacing whatever tool whatever tool we find useful for something, we'll replace it. Right now, I'd say it's a mix of Campfire Chat, Pivotal Tracker, Asana, and there's probably a few other things that I'm forgetting, but those are what we mostly use.
Whatever you do, just don't do everything in email, which is what we did when we started off with, because email and Gchats, because then when people come onto the team later, they don't see. You can even have your culture can be reflected in your, and some of our most hilarious assembler tickets are when somebody really senior to the team will like go in and put like this hilarious image of this bug that we changed after a long time or something like that. But the point being is whatever tools you build, that there's a legacy for people to go back and to ramp up quickly, especially new people to your team. And if it's all through email threads and they don't know those people, they're like, wow, is this a fight? I don't know what's going on here. These guys, like, yeah.
Yeah, I think the point is there's a lot of different tools out there. It's just pick your tools, make sure that the team can use them and they can effectively use them for all the different purposes that they need to, and they can rally around them. And then you take feedback as
Yeah.
you go.
If people aren't using it,
If they're not using it, then
that's a sign that it's the wrong tool.
Exactly. Is there? Yeah.
I can just talk about it.
Right here. How did you guys, how did the companies and the culture react to the first employees either leaving or needing to be laid off?
Our first one actually was a dramatic firing and quitting, and we were really worried about it because he was an engineer and he was in our he had recruited most of our Portland engineers, and he dramatically left and asked if because he hadn't been effective, and he went into the office and asked them if they thought he was what they thought, and they actually looked back at him and said, we don't know what you've been doing, and it just sort of, he left and it just healed itself, and it was actually a really big surprise. Like, it was something that we had stressed over for months and months, and actually I think the employees ultimately appreciated, because when somebody isn't lifting isn't doing as much as they should, it's affecting absolutely everybody, and they appreciated it being dealt with, even though it was their friend. And actually, they're all still friends with him, and we're friendly now too. But it was, I drank a lot that day.
Josh, we had an earlier conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something I'm really obsessed with right now. So one of the things we do at Eastside Games is we focus on the ramp down as well, because I find another problem that we have that's inherent in our cultures, good and bad, is staff hoarding. So we have these awesome people, these A players that work for us, and we just want them to work for us forever. I never want anyone to ever leave, ever. I just want them to work for me. But they probably don't want to work for me forever. They want to come in, they work, and then they want to try other things. So we are really working hard, lots of failures, some wins, on doing ramp down. So we work closely with people to identify, you want to try something else, you don't fit into my culture, maybe you want to try and work at your company, we know each other, so what's preventing us from Eastside Games saying, dude, you got to go work for them. You don't want to make a farming game anymore. You want to make this, or you want to make a battle game. So we've had some successes in that, and what we find is in the successes is when people leave, they have a really good feeling and a really good experience about working there. Whereas in traditional gaming space and in other industries as well, and it's not just us, that when you leave, like, you always hear about people that leave a company and then like throw away all the shirts they ever got from it and just hate the place, and it's like, you had so many good years, why are you so angry now? And it's just like and I think that whole secrecy stuff too wears on people, because they feel like they're being disloyal to the culture by looking for something else, but maybe they always wanted to work at this place. So I'm working hard to try to figure out a way how to smoothen that out and let people know, because, you know, great partners and employees, they're only on loan to you. You don't own them forever, and they probably want to go out and make their own Eastside games or their own thing, or work for Congregate, or work for Kano Apps. I wouldn't let them work at Yukon, but I'd let them work at all these other places. So we should help them do that.
To add to what Josh said, what we do so we've actually had people leave and start their own company, which is something that we really encourage, actually. We have a massive office space, and if any time someone decides to leave to go start their own thing, or maybe just go and experiment with a new company, we do encourage them to come back and hang out at the office and use our office as a space to kind of work in and chat with the mentors. We're still 60 people, one office. We're big in terms of numbers, but everyone is fairly close. We haven't grown super fast. It's been, one or two people every few weeks. So any single time someone new comes in, you feel closely connected to them. So we, I don't know, is that fast? I don't know, is it? I don't know. Compared to some of the other Vancouver startups that are like now 300 people and we're only 100 last year, I feel.
There's been faster.
There's been faster, I guess, yeah. I guess we've just done a pretty good job of even onboarding new hires and integrating them into our culture. But one of the other things as well to add to when people leave is we have a constant feedback loop with people. So we know, I've actually know pretty much all the engineers that are probably going to go and start their own thing one day. So I always chat with them to kind of have that rapport to see how things are going, and I will always ask them who in the company do they plan on having their first startup with. So it's always good to have that rapport with people so that when they do decide to leave, they don't feel scared or nervous to go and have that conversation with the founder and say, oh, well, now I want to go start my own thing. Am I screwing you over? They've already have that kind of conversation started from the get-go, and everyone kind of already knows, and it's something that we celebrate versus treat as a failure.
I think we sincerely want everybody to be happy and to be fulfilled. And if you're doing a good job in terms of with one-on-ones and communication with the employee, you're finding out, what they really want and what that should, where they should go, and you can have that frank discussion as to.
Better to have a conversation than to not. I think.
Yeah.
I get it's 11:55. We have time for probably one more if there's anyone.
Hi, so teams and culture, they generally consist of people. And when you guys hire people, do you look for specific skill sets, or do you put a lot of attention to personalities, psychology, how people are going to mesh together, and do you really invest yourself in making sure that you choose the right people who would get along and work well with everyone else?
And I think that, a good tangent to that as well is also just the instances that you've hired someone and they've been the bad hire. Is it because their skills weren't up to par, or is it because they just weren't a fit? And how come you didn't find that out earlier? How do you know?
The bad fits have mostly been it's been skills. I think a sort of welcoming company culture can encompass a lot of different types of personalities, from deep introverts to total extroverts. And if you have good open communication, then the people who are sort of frank and brutally honest can still work with people who aren't. I think where almost every bad fit has mostly been a sort of skill or skill set or kind of drive issue. I can't think of anybody where it was truly just a personality, though sometimes personality and other things are intertwined where it's a little hard to tell.
For us, it's actually been the reverse. It's always been kind of personality, because we put people through rigorous tests in order to get in. If it's an art test or for design, they have to do design and economy or programming, that sort of thing. So we have all these tests they have to get through. So they kind of pass it, and then we kind of just see, what they're like. And it's like building an all-star hockey team. You want to make sure that I'm Canadian. I have to throw the hockey reference in. Like you just want to make sure people are good in the dressing room. They can't just have the best skills. So for us, it's always been people that are the best of the best, awesome with skills, and then they just don't fit or they clash with the culture right away. And the great thing about having the open communication in your culture is when you don't notice it, but someone comes up to you within 2-3 days of them and be like, it's not going to be a fit. Like your team's telling you this, so they're rejecting them right away. That's usually almost always be like, I don't think this is going to work.
I'd say the one thing that is sort of non-negotiable is sort of like ethical values type of things. I think someone who's sleazy is probably not making it through our process.
Right. Yeah.
I was just going to say some of the things that we do to kind of really try and match culture during the hiring process is we're obviously very transparent during our interview process. Similar to Eastside Games, we have a very regimented engineering interview process, and similar to game design and art and whatnot. But we really do have like either myself or our recruiter who does like the first initial call, and we do a lot of testing of like language, if whether there's any language barriers. We try to really get to know the person and give them as much information about our culture as possible, about there being like transparency, core hours, do you want to move to Vancouver? And then also before their start date, if they do go through all those tests, we invite them either to our office for our breakfast that we do, which is home cooked on Tuesdays, or our lunch, or for beer on Fridays, so that they can come and see kind of the office at different phases of the day and different times of the week. But also we get to know the candidate even before their first day, where we send them out an email and have them answer 5 questions, and then we kind of try and build that rapport with our team internally before they even start. So people will start emailing a new hire before their start date, and a lot of them form relationships then. So people kind of have a buddy when they arrive, and someone's like, oh, you're Mike, and I love Star Wars too, or I like playing this game as well, and people kind of start bonding earlier on versus trying to fit in. So that's kind of worked for us a lot.
Okay. So I think that's all our time. I just wanted to thank everybody in the room. Thank all the panelists for sharing. I think the underlying points of what I heard is that everybody has a unique way to approach their culture. Everybody has gotten to where they've gotten, and all these companies have gotten to where they've gotten in a unique way. And what I see that's common is that you guys are all still learning and iterating on your culture, and you care what everybody in the company thinks, and you want to make sure that they feel ownership over what they're building. And so you're creating this feeling where people don't feel like they don't have an outlet to talk to other people and influence what they're part of, and that's really great. And yeah, I think this was a good talk.